Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Closing the Skills Gap, a framework for future success. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer. So this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel. So this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points, feel free to send them over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to weave the questions in as it relates to what we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. I am recording the webinar today, so I'll make a link to the slides, recording, and follow-up information available on our blog at bizlibrary.com/bizblog. I also put a link to the slides in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should have also received a link to the slides in the reminder email that you received this morning. Today's session has been approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you HR professionals attending. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar, and I'll also send out a link to the completion certificate in a follow-up email that you'll receive within 24 hours. If you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary. I've been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of BizLibrary at BizLibrary and also at my own account at Jess L. Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around training and development, human resources, and marketing. So if you're on either of those social networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for BizLibrary. He's also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. He's been performing learning development and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. Chris is also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne STL, and he's also on LinkedIn, so I'm sure he'd love it if you'd reach out and connect as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on BizLibrary, BizLibrary is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. The award-winning content library contains more than 7,000 online employee training videos covering every training topic area, so things like communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance and safety training, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, BizLibrary's LMS, or Learning Management System, and social learning technology platform help HR and training leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I have 2 quick poll questions for today's attendees. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a minute. So how would you assess the skill level of employees in your organization who might be considered for promotion? Would you say, excellent, we have a pool of ready now candidates, B, not ready, we have candidates but they need development, C, we don't know, we have candidates but we don't have a good way to evaluate their readiness for promotion, or D, something else?
Hey Jessica, how you doing?
Hey Chris, I'm great, how are you?
I am good. Just came back from a local American Marketing Association meeting, and I'm all excited to be here today with everybody visiting us, so it should be good.
Yeah, glad you made it on time. Chris always likes to make things interesting, so he did a bit of a double header for us today. But just go with the flow. It usually turns out just fine.
I'm glad you recognize that, because that's sort of our motto, and it's a skill gap that you have closed, actually. You've always been pretty good with my resistance to structure, I must say.
Well, there you go. I don't know if it's a skill. It's just a tolerance. All right. Let's see. All right. So let's see. We've got about 58% have voted so far. So you should see the poll up on your screen. Looks like we've got.
This is, kidding aside, this is an interesting topic. I mean, this has been all over the learning and development and HR literature now for a while. And we recently published an ebook on this topic, which I thought was pretty interesting. But this is the first webinar on this topic that we have done. So I'm real interested. So I don't have anything past results to compare the poll results we're seeing today to, and I'm very interested to see the questions that we're going to get during today's webinar. So should be interesting today.
Yeah, I'm interested to see kind of what questions and feedback we get as well, because it's kind of all over the place. I mean, you can't really go on. I mean, it's across all industries. It's everyone's talking about skills gaps. Is it real? Is it about our education system? So it's kind of all over the place. Everyone's got their hands in it. So I'm interested to see what questions and feedback we get today from learning and development professionals and HR professionals. All right, I'll go ahead and close this poll out and share the results with everyone. So it looks like we've got 64% said not ready. We have candidates, but they need development. 60% said excellent. We have a pool of ready now candidates. 12% say we don't know. We have candidates, but aren't sure how to evaluate them. And then 9% said something else.
Yeah, again, I don't have anything to compare this to, but I think that's interesting that nearly 2/3 not ready. We have candidates, but they need development, which isn't too far off from some data that you found for us, which we're going to share in just a little while. So I find that very interesting. So well, I don't know how else to respond to that. Just interesting to me that our data, our research is so close to our poll results.
Yeah, so this next quick poll question is, how would you rate your organization's current strategy to address the skills gap? Is it A, we don't have a skills gap, so we don't need a strategy? B, we don't have a strategy. C, we have a great strategy with ready now candidates. D, we're trying, but nothing's working well. Or E, something else.
Yeah, and again, we don't have anything to compare this with, but I'm real curious. So those of you who say something else, please let us know what that is. I would really be curious. And as we move through today's session, and we're going to give you, I hope, are some good strategy ideas for how to fill this, what we see as a challenge for many organizations, but interesting results, I think. And again, I think this kind of tracks the data that we're seeing, the results that we're getting in our poll here today, Jessica. Fascinating.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and close it out. Looks like we've got 45% say we don't have a strategy. 21% said we're trying, but nothing we're doing is really working well. 15% say we have a strategy with ready now candidates. 15% said something else. So that's a pretty big percentage. So if you want to let us know through the chat, that will help us out in making sure that we target these polls a little better in the future. And then 4% said we don't have a skills gap, so we don't need a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, so there's 3 high-level things that we hope that you take away from today. Chris, do you want me to hold on to the slides, or you want me to pass them over?
You know what? Given that I'm working from my home office today, if you don't mind holding the slides, let's, just in case my connection drops, I think that would be great. And you're going to be co-presenting with me on so much of this today. I think this is going to be just fine. Are you okay with that?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, so there's the things we want to make sure we cover today and talk about is there are 3 strategic shifts that we believe can make an impact on your organization's approach to human capital management and development that can help you address skill gaps that you may be experiencing. And actually, I want to get you to think a little bit differently about skill gaps, which is kind of laid out in the second point. So how to determine and close current, but also future gaps when we hear organizations talk about skill gaps and we read the popular literature, both in sort of the broad media and in the learning and development media, we really see a lot of people talking about current skill gaps. And so I want you to think about that a little bit differently. And then we want to talk about some focus areas to identify places where your organization can see fairly immediate business benefits if you'll kind of think about it that way. So, one of the first questions I think that merits examination is, does the gap really exist? And one of the things that when Jessica and I were first talking about this concept, because there are a lot of different ways to look at this, but we've seen the data from the Department of Labor and from some other places about the huge number of people that are either unemployed or underemployed in the economy. But then right next to it, you see information about the number of unfilled openings in the economy. And you would think that with so many people looking for work that we would have very few unfilled openings. So there's a disconnect here someplace. And you have employers saying that 80% of employers say they're concerned about a skills gap, but only 40% are doing anything about it, which again sort of tracks what we learned in that last poll question. 45% of our participants said they don't have a strategy. So 40% of the participants in this College for America study published by Career Builder is pretty close. So to me, this is just such a fascinating strategic disconnect between the social pressures associated with what we're seeing in the marketplace and what's happening. So just fascinating data in my view. So it kind of comes down to this. For a lot of people, it kind of goes back to this. If you're a carpenter, every problem looks like a nail. And for a lot of us, that are in learning and development, every problem, looks like a training challenge. And in some ways this is, but in other ways there are more, strategic underpinnings to what we're seeing, having to do with the way we're approaching broader issues within our organization, the way we're approaching succession planning, for instance, the way we are connecting employees to each other, the way we are facilitating social learning and interaction. There are a whole range of approaches that we can take to getting employees connected more effectively to the things they need to be doing to be successful, and more importantly, connected to the types of high-skilled jobs that we need them to perform that go beyond just a simple training and development solution. It requires some strategic shifts that I think are important to think through carefully. Jessica, does that? Oh, yeah, perfect. I really wanted to get right to this slide. This is great. One of the things that we see as we begin to dive through, again, we talk about the poll results we had. Earlier, we had the poll result about, promotable skills. This is that STAIN study that Jessica found earlier. 87% say employees are missing promotable skills. Jessica, you've put this together. You've made this infographic from that study. Help us understand this a little bit better. This is really interesting information.
Yeah, so it had information around, tuition reimbursement and getting new employees ready for the workforce. So there's a lot of other information that was included in this study, but this is some of what I thought was important for today's session. So if you look at it, so they were giving the question, so please choose which comes closest to your company's strategy for filling roles. So you look at it, so looking at team leaders and middle management, they were looking to develop 73% of that, and they were looking to hire in 27% of those. So rather than development, just hire them from the outside. Then looking at senior managers and executives, they were looking to develop 67% of them, and then 33% of them we're hiring them in. So there's a gap. So I mean, if there's a difference, if if you want, do you have the capacity in your training and development department to develop these employees, or if you don't, I mean, you can't really control everything. So if you're looking at it, look at what you can control. So if there is a gap out there, so maybe employees or future employees are coming out of college, or maybe they're coming from other workplaces and they aren't really ready to fit in your organization, or they don't have the skill set to really make an impact yet. So you can't really control those outside factors. You can't control what future employees are necessarily learning in college, or how they're being prepared in internships or co-ops or other things like that. But you can control what you're doing internally and what you're doing in your training and development department. So it's really, do you have the capacity and you have a strategy to help move them along. So then you said 87% say that employees are missing those promotable skills. So that's huge. So how can we close that 87%? That's a huge number.
Well, yeah, it's massive. I mean, and you kind of have to get back to what's the root cause of that disconnect. I mean, are we, from a strategic perspective, then, are we correctly identifying the skills that we need to be developing to prepare employees for their next more complicated role, for those next roles, for the promotions that we're trying to identify for them? Have we done that effectively? Are we building an employee development strategy, an employee development plan then that executes the strategy with an eye towards future needs? Or, going back to the idea of the carpenter and the nail, are we simply looking at current needs and trying to fill current skill gaps, or helping employees solve current problems, improving existing skills to solve current problems? It's been the traditional approach to training for a long, long time, but in this marketplace with so many changes, so much change, such rapid change, such a complex marketplace, such an ambiguous kind of world we live in, maybe it requires a different approach to things. I think this data helps illustrate that in pretty clearly, which ties right into these three strategic areas that we think merit examination. And this is a great way to kind of lead to this. This is a really wonderful quote. I love these next two slides. First, there's so many really brilliant thinkers out there in this space. We're so fortunate to be in a place with such bright people. I think this is all from John Ambrose, if I remember correctly, who's the VP of Strategy at Skillsoft. But at the level of an individual contributor, ability is demonstrated by the ability to quickly solve day-to-day business problems, to identify new processes and frameworks for speed of delivery, to cross global and functional lines without faltering, and to accept, respond, and initiate change. Employees who can identify opportunities, adapt, and thrive in the reality of change have a propensity to be high performers. Given the right resources and investment in learning, these traits are achievable across the entire organization. And this is from a piece written by John Ambrose, The Impact of Workforce Agility on Business Performance, which ties right into, again, these three strategic pieces, which get to the idea of a future orientation to our human capital strategies, to our learning and development strategies, thinking of them not so much as helping our employees solve current problems, which is important. I'm not going to discount that, but helping our organization prepare to be competitive and move ahead in the marketplace in the future, to build a competitive advantage for our employees, for our leaders, and for our entire company going forward. So it requires us to think about a different way of sourcing, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about that because I don't want you to think that's just about recruiting. We have the different take on that a little bit. It requires a real strategic approach to succession planning all of which lead to training and development. Jessica, anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think we're ready to dive right in. But like you said, we're treating these as a strategic framework that you can use and thinking about closing the skill gaps a little bit differently.
Okay, so in terms of sourcing, you know, there's a whole range of ways to think about this concept. And I want you to think about it from this perspective. As you are identifying individuals, both within and without your organization, for preparation for promotion, for tackling these job gaps, these high-skilled jobs that you're having difficulty filling, or, you know, jobs that, you know, to learn new jobs, whatever the case may be. Think about individuals in your organization who have great potential. And it's a different way of thinking sometimes. So instead of looking for people with, you know, XYZ credentials and XYZ years of experience, think about people who have the ability to acquire skills, people who have proven that they've been flexible and adaptable over the course of their career, be it a short career or a lengthy career, and who have proven that they have learning agility, that is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn the skills and competencies necessary to be successful. I mean, if you step back and think about it, I mean, I'm going to use human resources as an example. I'm going to use marketing as an example because both professions have been profoundly affected by advances in technology and social media and social tools and Web 2.0. But think about the way human resources functions today with HRIS tools, the way learning and development has advanced with, you know, learning technologies and learning platforms, and the way we recruit employees today. I mean, can you imagine, truthfully, can you imagine an HR professional in today's world that is charged with connecting with folks outside of our organization not being adept at social media? I mean, social media skills are really sort of foundational for many functions in human resources today. That wasn't true even 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, this is a foundational shift in the way an entire segment of a critical profession functions. The same is true in marketing. There are, in fact, entire job families within marketing that did not exist as recently as 3 and 4 years ago. You can go to LinkedIn, you can go to Indeed.com and look up jobs associated with marketing automation. And you'll see lots of organizations looking for marketing automation specialists, and they're looking for several years of experience. Well, the reason they're not finding those people is those jobs have only existed for a short period of time. So if we are expecting to find those people with those highly specialized skills from outside our organization, we are not going to do it, which gets me to the point about sourcing differently, thinking differently about where we can find these hard-to-find skills. So we want to look for potential in different places. Look within. Look for employees who have demonstrated the ability to acquire new skills, which leads me to an interesting, I think, Jessica and I had this conversation yesterday, an interesting observation about baby boomers. If you've got successful baby boomers around your office, think about all of the different things and all of the changes in the business world, the business environment that they have successfully navigated over the course of their professional lives and their careers. There's a good chance that at some innate level, they have the ability to acquire new skills and have demonstrated success in the competency of learning agility at some level over the course of their career. And I would be willing to bet pretty good money that we don't always think about our more seasoned, our more experienced employees as potentially filling these hard-to-fill openings. Anyway, it's just an interesting thought. I know, Jessica, you and I talked about that yesterday. It sounded like kind of an aha moment for you when we were talking about that.
Well, I mean, because so much of it of closing skill gaps are focused on younger employees or employees that are first coming into the workforce. But what are we really doing to take advantage of our more experienced employees? So if you're looking at millennials, so I'm a millennial. So when I came into the workplace, it was always kind of this, like Chris described it, this VUCA world. So everything's kind of changing, it's uncertain. And you come to just kind of realize that, change isn't really a bad thing. It's just the way things are. Usually it means something's going to be improved. Sometimes it doesn't, but we just kind of go with it and adapt and hopefully it turns out well. But if you look at what boomers have gone through, or even Gen X, so the way that they've had to experience change, so sometimes it's been huge, it's been radically different. So what can we take from their experience with change? How can we balance that different kind of generational differences in the perspective of change? So how can we say, okay, hold on, does that make sense? Is it really going to ask the why? Is it really going to benefit the organization? So how can we capture that knowledge, and how can we help to kind of create these cross relationships or cross mentorships that's going to help fill the gaps on either side?
Yeah, well said. Okay, so the next critical strategic piece, this framework that I think is important, is succession planning. Now, we do an entire webinar about succession planning, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we sometimes think of succession planning as sort of preparing a replacement. So we've got a VP of sales, so we have a director of sales that we're going to groom to take over that position. And while that certainly can be a great byproduct of a good succession planning effort, it really can't stop there. If you're going to have a succession planning effort that really is strategically aligned with the overall objectives of your organization. Again, going back to the idea that we really can't predict with any degree of certainty what types of jobs and what types of skills are going to be mission critical and necessary for the success of our organization 2, 3, 5 years out. So we need to approach succession planning a little differently. First, it needs to have a relentless future orientation, helping prepare high potential employees for success in the future. So preparing them for more complex roles, to assume responsibilities that they don't have today. And it is really important that we're targeting leaders at every level of our organization. Sometimes informal leaders are great participants in these types of programs. But we have to make sure that our succession planning program is strategically aligned to address sort of the future needs of the organization, and we're going to give you some suggestions on how to identify those in just a moment. So the third of the three critical strategic, sort of the third leg of the stool, is training and development. We want to make sure that what we're doing here is really making sure that what we are doing is developing people that we've hired for potential because of their ability to grow and acquire new skills, people that we've hired because of their capacity for growth, for their integrity, and now we've got the raw material to really, really see some great results in our training and development programs. So we want to build specific skills targeted at two different places. There's a present and a future orientation for this effort. So we have current needs. We have goals that we have to achieve in 6 months and 9 months and 12 months. Those are important. So you can't leave those untouched. Those are extremely important. But we have to also focus on building the potential and maximizing the future potential of our employees. And that really needs to be an important part of the strategic objectives of our organizational development programs. There's a great quote from a fantastic article called The Big Idea. Harvard Business Review publishes a Big Idea article. It was written by Claudio Fernandez Arroyo, and it was called 21st Century Talent Spotting. It appeared this summer. What makes someone successful in a particular role today might not tomorrow if the competitive environment shifts. The company's strategy changes, or he or she must collaborate with or manage a different group of colleagues. And that is a perfect summary of why we have to approach sourcing differently, succession planning differently, and training and development. All of those elements need to come together with a strategic focus that looks ahead, because we don't know what's going to make people successful in the future, which gets back to a focus on potential, on capacity for improvement, the ability to shift and change. All of that becomes really important. So that all begs the question, doesn't it? How do we figure out what to focus on? Chris, if we want to do this and have a future orientation, is there a methodology that we can use, short of buying a crystal ball, to figure out what we need to be thinking about? And in fact, there is. It's an old-fashioned but very useful consultant's tool. It's SWOT analysis. And if you do this effectively, what SWOT analysis does, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is a great framework for asking good questions. When we ask ourselves good questions and ask our organization good questions, we set the foundation. We create the opportunity to get good answers. We will never get good answers in terms of what we need to be doing in the future unless we are asking good questions. And this is an outstanding framework to begin to do that for ourselves. So strengths and weaknesses, strengths are what are, that's sort of a current situation. What do we do well today? And I love extending that a little bit. Well, these strengths prepare us for future success. And weaknesses, again, what do we not do so well today? I mean, can we minimize these things? But opportunities and threats, these are external focused. And these are where we can really begin to look to the future. Opportunities, where are our greatest opportunities for growth? And threats, where are we vulnerable? And the answers to those inquiries really begin to help us hone in on the answers that will inform our learning and development, our succession planning, and the keys to sourcing. So this next slide kind of lays out some of where this goes. So, where are our greatest opportunities for growth? Do we have an open playing field in terms of competition? Let me give you an example specific to our industry. There's been so much consolidation in our industry that Biz Library has some great opportunities. There aren't as many competitors left. Is your organization in a similar situation? Do you have, new products, or have competitors really fallen on hard times and you've got an opportunity for market growth there? Do you have a new product coming out that is exciting and innovative? Where are your greatest opportunities for growth? Is there a territory that you've never explored before? Is it international? Is it, you've never done, whatever the case may be? Are your strengths aligned, properly aligned, to take advantage of these opportunities? And if so, how can we really, really jump on that and move forward? Or do our weaknesses stand in the way? So these are the sort of good questions that begin to help you identify the kind of learning and development opportunity, needs that your organization can jump on to really build that future capacity. And the threats are just as important. You have to understand where you're vulnerable. Is there a learning and development opportunity here to help fill that vulnerability gap? Can we influence or control the threats? If you can, you definitely want to do that. Are they market-driven? Are they competitive? And I love this last one. Does the threat exist because we have a lack of talent or not the right talent? Again, great questions to ask that begin to give you the kind of answers that you can use to develop effective strategic plans to move your organization forward. So again, looking for these opportunities and threats, this gives you a chance to identify these high performers and really begin to move them from where they are today into that next role. Maybe they're going to be a new manager, maybe they're going to be something else. Jessica, you put this illustration together, and I really like it. So explain this transformation that you're illustrating here for us, because I really like this a lot.
Sure. So for example, you have someone that's considered a high performer, but they're an individual contributor, and you're hoping to move them along into a role as a new manager. So maybe instead of looking at the gaps that they have in their current role, so I don't think this is anything that's that crazy to grab onto, but instead of just looking at the gaps that they have in their current role, so say, okay, before you can move on to be a new manager, you need to improve this specific skill, and maybe it's a to-do skill or something that's a little bit more tactical that's not really going to serve them well as a new manager, because once they're a new manager, they're focused on developing people and managing people rather than the to-dos and managing the tasks. So look at those skills that are going to be required of them. So maybe they're on, instead of a new manager program, this high performer or high potential employee is put into a road to manager program. And in that, you're actually giving them courses and training and development opportunities that you would have thought to give to a new manager in the first place. So maybe they're taking these supervisor success or supervisor to superstar courses while they're being a high performer, and they're being groomed to move into that new manager role. So by giving them something that's a little more challenging and able to move into those skills, you can see, okay, do they have the capacity to improve? Do they have the capacity to learn these new skills? So instead of focusing on their current roles and gaps, looking to those future skills, what's different that's going to be required that's different in their future role.
Yeah, Jessica, I'm looking into the question panel. We've got a question, I think, that fits in pretty well right here, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so there was a point from Indra. So given the right investment is the key word. So this was coming from that quote. So having the right investment and the right resources, you're able to develop your employees into these kind of learning, agile, really powerhouse of an organization. But you said, given the right investment is the key word, and so many executives aren't willing to make that investment. So that leads to the question, how do we get execs to support and invest in training and development, especially when we have so many high priorities now? So maybe we have all these fires, all these priorities now that we need to focus on. How can we even get them to start looking into these future skills or future requirements and to actually invest in them?
Well, that's a super question, and it becomes the answer becomes part of your plan. And part of this is about laying out, building a business case for all of this, which is part of what this is all about. And a good way to get at that is to think of it this way. There's a funny cartoon and illustration that I posted at LinkedIn a long time ago. I didn't draw it. I found it was really good. But it's the CFO and CEO are talking. The CFO asks the CEO, what if we spend all this money and train employees and they leave? And the CEO responds, well, what if we don't train them and they stay? And ultimately, that is the issue, isn't it? It has to be set up so that there isn't a choice for the executives, that an investment in training becomes just so apparent that it's critical to maintain and build a competitive advantage. And there are all kinds of benefits to building a learning culture and moving things forward. But in order to build that business case, you have to begin with the basics. So, we're laying all this out, which requires that we build a plan. So we've got to make sure that we've got a good understanding of these elements. What's the training content and the level that we're going to target to various employees? How are we going to get it to them? Do we have a great training partner that we can work with? And what's the timing? How are we going to get this done in an effective way so that we can deliver the sort of business results that we want? Well, one of the ways you can do it is leverage technology. You don't have to do all this in a classroom anymore. That was one of the, we've seen all the surveys, you've seen all the research that talks about the effectiveness of training, you've seen people complain about training. There are a whole range of reasons for it. But one of the things that technology can do for you is it can remove the barriers between your employees and the content they need when they need it in order to perform their jobs better. And this is really, really an important way to think about technology tools. This can create integrated learning experiences for your entire organization that are indistinguishable from their day-to-day work experience. It just becomes a part of how they work and what they do. Your employees are already bringing tablets and smartphones to work. They're using them for all sort of work-related purposes. I promise you they are. They really and truly are. So leverage those behaviors, leverage those technologies, provide the tools on those delivery devices to help them perform their jobs better. But it requires you to define the expectations for that. It requires you to do a variety of things that can change the trajectory of that use, and it requires you to adapt and adopt sort of, social networking tools so you can get everybody's input and get that pulled together. So, so that's sort of a macro level. Then at the individual level, make sure that you have individual development plans, which kind of make sure that everybody has an understanding of, again, what's expected. This isn't a performance management. This is a resource. This is an individually developed resource to help our employees focus their direction as they manage their own development program. Employees are already learning on their own. I promise you they are. They really and truly are. They are talking to each other. They're looking at things online. They are doing this. So why not help focus? Show them what you need them to learn and give them the tools to do it. Talk to them about the areas in which they need to improve. Show them the competency. Lay out for them the objectives. Give them the resources. Provide a timeline. Say, hey, in 90 days, I'd love it if you knew these things, and look for evidence of accomplishment and then reward it, acknowledge it, talk about it. Another thing that we're seeing over and over, I mentioned this earlier with the marketing, and we're seeing it in human resources and in learning and development, is the rise of the specialist. This is a huge thing that's going on. And so how can you focus plans and certifications to help people do this? I mean, pay attention to industry and market trends. Identify those key levels of mastery necessary to do this. I mean, this is something that is absolutely happening in virtually every discipline across organizations. We are certainly seeing it in marketing. We're certainly seeing it in learning and development. We're certainly seeing it in human resources. So, the rise of specialists is not going to diminish. We're going to see specialists become more, not less important as organizations move forward. Just think about jobs, critical jobs that exist today that really fit into narrow niches. Graphic user interface specialists, your web developers, your programmers, your engineers. I mean, it's all over the place. And organizations are becoming more and more dependent upon subject matter expertise and specialists that really, really can drive success. So, which gets to this next slide. These are these three areas that we see as extremely important, both for a current and future orientation, critical areas to develop, where organizations are realizing competitive benefits when they focus development in these areas. Leadership skills. Developing leaders is something that pays dividends in so many ways. It is just an absolute winner on a number of places. IT and desktop computing skills, think about all the innovations and changes, efficiency changes. I mean, they are centered around technology literacy, digital literacy. So finding ways to make sure that your employees stay up to date. And then again, this rise of the specialists, technical and professional skills with, again, a future orientation towards identifying and taking advantage of opportunities, addressing threats to the extent that they're there, and a current orientation, leveraging strengths and addressing weaknesses. That SWOT analysis, using a SWOT analysis to ask questions around these three areas will really begin to help you hone in on and find answers to whether or not these are training and development needs that your organization needs to address. So in terms of the leadership skills, Jessica's got a great info for leadership practices. Companies, millions of dollars each year, equal to 7% of annual sales. That's making the business case for leadership development from Ken Blanchard. I mean, these things impact all kinds of areas. I mean, it's not just one or two things. And this next slide is from a bit of research conducted by Burson by Deloitte, and it was based upon a survey of CEOs They said, here are major managerial skill gaps. You're looking for a curriculum for your managers? Here you go. These are 6 skills commonly identified by CEOs that they wish their mid-level managers had. And think about how much better your organization would perform if your frontline managers did these 6 things better. Wow, that would be pretty impressive, wouldn't it? So this next slide identifies sort of some areas that we see in terms of emerging skills for leaders at every level. There's a couple here that you don't always hear about, but emotional intelligence, there's some data that proves pretty conclusively that is the single biggest indicator of success. High performers have this competency honed to a high level more than any other competency. Learning agility, we're going to see that rise in importance as we begin to respond to this. Jessica used the acronym earlier, VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Learning agility is going to be a competency that's going to become more and more important in that space as we need people to be much more adaptable. Presentation skills. How many times have we seen something fall apart because we couldn't present the information effectively? And leaders need to be able to do this. And again, digital literacy, we've talked about that. That just seems to be, I just think it's a basic foundational skill. And we see leaders over and over that just don't do that very effectively. So then technical and professional skills, only 15% of U.S. college graduates major in, the STEM areas, science, technology, engineering, or math. And this has been really constant even as demand has grown, which gets back to the idea of, so what are we doing to, one, find these people and then retain them? We get them, we have to find a way to retain them. This is extremely important. And again, thinking about employees that we currently have, can we find ways to encourage them to take these types of jobs or go get the necessary training or build these skills? Again, thinking about sourcing somewhat differently, but looking at the areas in which these types of skills are going to become more and more important. Human resources becoming more and more critical, that we have technical skills. I mean, these areas, you see this all over the place if you look at the big job boards. I mentioned earlier the IT and computer skills, kind of thinking carefully about just all of the changes in terms of productivity and efficiency, the cost of the digital skills gap. Jessica's next slide has a fantastic infographic. This one shocked me. Jessica, you found this, and you are a digital native. Did this information surprise you?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. But think about it at the same time. I mean, if you think about how many times you're like, there's got to be a better way to find this file or to do this one task. And sometimes you'll seek it out and you're like, why didn't I look at that earlier? So there's a lot of time even if you're someone that's, digital native or whatever, digitally literate, there's so many little things that you don't take the time to learn how to do it a better way. That's just like costing you productivity and time over and over again. So it is kind of surprising, but at the same time, you can think about all those little things, they add up.
Well, they do. And, there's another stat that we use. It was a study done at Carnegie Mellon University about knowledge workers and the rise of the knowledge worker, a study done over a number of years, concluding, I think in 2011 or something, that for knowledge workers, we only hold 6 to 8% of the knowledge we need to effectively do our job in our brains. Now, how's that for an interesting paradox? And this is part of the issue, frankly, is the rapid and constant change in the applications and the tools that we need to access and communicate and, build the knowledge tools that we're working with. I mean, it is mind-numbing. I mean, I'm not picking on Microsoft because we all use Microsoft tools, but think of all the iterations that Microsoft Office continues to go through, and it's continuing to go through. I mean, you just figure out one version of PowerPoint, now a whole new one comes out, and it's like, oh, good grief, I got to start all over. But these dips in productivity cost us real money. But you think about all of these areas for development. I mean, who could have predicted that mobile delivery of web content and learning content was going to be the critical piece? I mean, we've seen this rise over the past couple of years, and now all of a sudden there's this huge, huge gap in people with mobile development experience. Well, yep, you know what? People saw that coming, but organizations were slow to do the training. I mean, you know, these are areas where we really need help. User user experience, the big data, cloud computing. I mean, these things are here now. So what are we doing? Are we addressing these? Are we not addressing these? I mean, again, doing your SWOT analysis, which areas in your IT and computing skills areas are you adequately prepared for? Are you not adequately prepared for? And what are you doing to fill these in? Okay, so hopefully, we've got you to think a little differently about sourcing, about how to think about candidates for hard-to-fill jobs, or even candidates to take a look at for new jobs, new openings, those things that are going to be popping up over the next 3 to 5 years that we really can't predict very well today. And to take a new look at succession planning as a real, truly strategic initiative, and to recognize that a new approach, the next generation set of strategies to training and development, all of these things can make a big impact in your organization. Hopefully, we've convinced you that a SWOT analysis can really work to define gaps, strategic gaps, not only in your organization's goals and objectives, but also in the way your organization is training and developing employees. And I think Jessica did a great job of identifying the business case for us for the development of leadership, technical and professional, and IT and computing skills. So that was what we were hoping you'd get today. And Jessica, I think you've got a little bit of information, and I'm going to mute myself and start looking at the questions.
Sounds good, Chris. Again, feel free to send over additional questions and comments in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I have some recommended resources for today's attendees. This first one is Building for the Future, so help build your employees' professional network. So this is targeted to new employees or new hires. So how can you as a manager help them to reach out and build those networks? It's a short video, but it comes with a really helpful action guide. So it lays out different questions to ask and ask. And then also some development activities they can do. So instead of just watching a video, it has some kind of hands-on things that they can incorporate. This next course, it's one of my favorites. It's called Great Managers Help People Hone Their Strengths. So it's another recommended. It's a short video from the leadership lesson series that we have. 2 other courses. We didn't talk a ton about it today. We did a little bit, but the importance of mentoring and setting up mentoring relationships and reverse mentoring relationships. So how can you take advantage of your more experienced employees, and how can you help them to develop experienced employees and less experienced employees? So this helps you get started with a mentoring program. It's a 4-course series, so these are 2 from that series. The first one is why a mentoring program works, so it gives you that business case, and then it actually lays out how you can start to create one. So those are some 4 great courses. We talked a little bit about certification, so the importance of professional development. BizLibrary also offers courses that can help you achieve that, so whether you're looking for HRCI certification or PMI, Six Sigma, ITIL, and more. So all of those are included in the BizLibrary collection. There's more than 7,000 videos and e-learning courses, covers more than 25 topic areas, and it's set up to where your employees get unlimited access. So if you want to try out any of the resources that I recommended today, or any of the other resources included in the collection, I'm going to put up a short poll throughout the question period, so just let me know if you'd like to do a free 30-day trial. So either let me know through the poll, or you can send over a quick chat as well. All right, so question comment from Indra. So she says, I find that some of our skill gaps are behavioral. Knowledge is easy. Behavioral is a harder thing to change. So any recommendations about how we can develop those behavioral skills with our employees?
Well, You know, it's interesting that you honed in on that specific comment because I did too. And then the comment right after that actually provides part of the answer, truthfully, to doing that. And it comes from Lynette. So, Indra, I'm going to address your comment, but I'm going to get some help from Lynette on this. Lynette says, yes, the skills that we had when we entered the workforce are not the same skills needed for the workforce of the future. So we should be encouraged to pursue professional development opportunities. Never stop learning is our motto, and she works at LaSalle University. So what Lynette is hinting at, and she's spot on, is finding a way to make continuous improvement and continuous learning kind of a cultural anchor, which is ultimately how we can really influence the behavioral changes necessary to address some of these skill gaps. You know, because part of the challenge when we think about future needs and some of these really challenging skill gaps, these sort of higher tier skills, these more complex skills that organizations, I think, rightly complain about having difficulty finding qualified people to take. A lot of this requires us to look for employees who exhibit behaviors that are going to facilitate curiosity, continuous learning, a drive for continuous improvement. If we can find people like that, both within and without our organization, we are setting the stage for building that type of culture where we have people who maybe can step into roles and grow into them and learn. If we do not have a culture that encourages or is set up to encourage continuous improvement and continuous learning, that becomes really difficult. And sad to say, I don't want to get into, a broader social or socioeconomic discussion about this, but a lot of organizations are paying the piper for not encouraging and not fostering a culture where continuous improvement is rewarded and encouraged, and that's really a shame.
All right, this next question is from Mark. So how can we measure capacity to improve in our employees?
Oh, that's a great question. I wish I had more time to think of a really great answer. But so, Mark, this is just kind of flying from the seat of my pants here, but this would be one of those really great things to explore in behavior-based interviewing. You would want people, you would ask the questions, tell me about a time when you had to learn something new and had to learn it quickly, one, and two, tell me how you demonstrated results from that thing that you learned. That's what I would want to hear about. And then I would want to begin to ask sort of follow-up questions. Well, how did you research that? Tell me about the learning experience. What sort of things motivated you to learn that new skill? Because if I would really be looking for people who were sort of intrinsically, well, it was interesting to me. I was curious. I would be looking for people that were intrinsically motivated to explore new things and find new ways to do things more on their own rather than, well, my boss told me to explore this. That, in my mind, would be the kind of things that I would be looking for. But that is how you would get at that. I think you'd be looking for an opportunity to have behavior-based questions, but be looking for very, very specific examples of things that they learned and then find out how they applied what they learned to get results. That's how I would get at that.
All right, sounds good. I'll go ahead and wrap up for today. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link to the certificate in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Just a reminder, I'll also send out an email that'll include a link to the certificate as well as the webinar recording and the slides. So you should expect that in your inbox around 4 p.m. Central Time today. Upcoming webinars include next week we have how to build a business case for online employee training, and then 5 ways to build a better leadership development program. So we have all of our webinars are free to attend. They're HRCI approved. Upcoming sessions are on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. So I hope you'll consider joining us for a future session. Thanks so much for attending with us today. Thanks for all the great questions. You'll get a short survey after the webinar today, so if you have any feedback for us, we'd certainly appreciate it. And then also if you'd like a free trial, you're welcome to do so if you go to bizlibrary.com/free trial.
Thanks everybody for attending. We really appreciate it, and let us know in the poll after the webinar or even in chat before you log off. Give us some feedback on the content today. It's the first time we've done this webinar. We'd love to know what you thought. But thank you very much for attending.